Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the last Q&A for our shorts programs. I'm really thrilled to be here today. So I will start just by introducing myself. My name is Jennifer Smith. I was on the programming committee for imagineNATIVE this year, which has been amazing, and I feel so grateful to have been invited. I'm coming to you from Treaty 1 territory. I'm really grateful to, I guess, have you on my homelands with me today, or to be with you from my homelands. Um, I'm going to just give you a visual descriptor of myself. I am a light-skinned woman with brown hair that is currently in braids, wearing glasses and earrings and a green dress. Behind me is a shelf with books and plants and art on it. And there's a plant over my shoulder. So I'd like to just also say congratulations to Naomi Beckford, who is the winner of one of our giveaways, for being such a strong presence in the director chats. Thank you so much for being so engaging. And imagineNATIVE will be directly in touch with you about your prize. So that's awesome news, something fun to announce to start us off. And I'm really happy to be introducing this program center, which focuses on a lot of community activism work, and the ways that we care for our communities and our peoples. I'd like to ask each of the directors here to introduce themselves and give a visual descriptor of themselves as well. So I'll start with Alex.
Good afternoon. I'm Alex van der Donk-Ferrand. I have brown hair, white skin, and I'm in a crazy garage with a lot of things behind me, lots of tools and a neon light on me. And I'm wearing a green jacket, and I'm the director for Ashes and Embers. And I grew up in Montreal. I'm French Canadian and Wendat and Peruvian too. So, hi.
Thank you. And Barry, I'll get you to go next.
Tanse Barabalinski Nansiga Sun. My name's Barry. I'm in Osquiti, Waskagan, Edmonton. I'm from here. I'm currently wearing a yellow shirt in my office with a plant over my shoulder, strategically placed, and my long dark hair. And I am the director of Premonition, a short piece that is part of a larger exhibit here in Edmonton at the new Indigenous Peoples Experience.
Thank you. And Inuk.
Yeah, hey, my name's Inuki Jorgensen. I'm from Greenland. I am wearing a blue shirt. I got short hair and white skin and blue eyes. Yeah, I'm the director of In the Shadow of the Dukdevite. I am a Greenlandic filmmaker. So though I'm sitting in Sweden at the moment, so it's dark out. So.
Awesome, thank you. And Rachel.
Bonjour, Wachier. My name's Rachel Garrick. I'm coming to you from Treaty 3 territory. I'm on the traditional lands of Lac Seul First Nation, which I'm a band member of. I guess I've got kind of fair skin. I've got fair skin, and I'm wearing a scarf. And it's kind of cold up here today. we got our first snowfall. In the background is it's a green background, green painted room, and I have a window behind me and a wreath hung up. And I'm the director of The Gift, a short film that's under 4 minutes. Miigwech.
Thank you so much. So as I said, this program theme thinking about center, one of the things that we talked about as a programming committee a lot, but also that I think about, as the center of where I pull things in my life from, or pull my goals in life from, is from my heart and from my community, which I really feel like came through in these films. And it's, the center is the central to our well-being, and how we find ways to tell the stories in beautiful ways, and to be able to care for our communities enough to tell all of our stories. And each of these films really portrays that in different ways. As I mentioned, I'm going to ask each of you questions about your work, but please feel free to jump in if there's things that you want to add at all. So, Inuki, I wanted to ask a little bit about your film, and so specifically, this film that talks about resource extraction and the ways the lands are affected. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the land and the role that it plays in the film. So it's really like this central part. There's these voiceovers, but in other ways, the viewer sort of gets to intimately know the land as well as you can through a screen, and not getting to live on it or having grown up on it. And I just wanted you to talk a little bit more about giving so much space to the land visually in the film, and also what it means to almost allow land to be a character in the, not a figure in the film. Maybe character isn't the word I want to use, but a figure in the film.
Yeah. I actually did I did a lot of planning on how I wanted to portray the town of Narsaq in southern Greenland, because this is a place that has had a lot of cultural importance in the forming of the modern Greenland as we know it today. I mean, back when Greenland, for those of you who don't know, Greenland is still formally a part of Denmark, but no longer a colony. We do have some sort of independence, but not completely. But Narsaq, the town of Narsaq, has always played an important role in this movement towards independence. And what I really wanted to portray in my film was this link between the past and the future, and how the land and the place of Narsaq is connected to this. And what I experienced having been growing up in southern Greenland is that Narsaq today is quite empty. And for me, I really wanted to find this symbolic image of the modern Greenland from when Greenland was modernized during the 1950s and 60s. And I wanted to show how it looked today, empty houses, worn down houses, and how it really melts in with the mountains in the background. So I really wanted to convey this emptiness of modernity in a way.
Thank you. Yeah. And then I'm going to move on to Barry. I really love that you use this experimental way of storytelling. I felt that it was really effective in bringing a lot of nuanced emotions to the forefront as the voiceovers were happening. It gives this, I really like that it gives quick glimpses into scenes that may have been happening on the lands. It gives glimpses into the spirit of the people. And it doesn't do this in a linear defined way that, we expect stories to be told in. And so I was just hoping that you could give us a little bit of more information into like why you use this experimental method, what you hoped, the viewer might get from it, and the ways that you feel that it helped you tell the story effectively.
Yeah, well, like I kind of briefly said, the piece is part of an experience, an exhibit, which has other factors as well. it was intended to be like a cultural center. So there is this draw towards telling a very linear story from a Western perspective, with like our non-Indigenous partners on the project. So speaking from pre-contact, immediately defining Indigenous history based off of its relationship to, settlers, then into contact, and then into, more contemporary issues. So one of the first things I wanted to do was to blow that up, and start looking at, Indigenous knowledge as philosophy that spans from the contemporary perspective all the way through to really historical perspectives. And to start to, blend that things that are happening in this place are happening through time, in future, in the past. They're all interconnected. So I was kind of trying to see how could I look at something from a perspective that is in tune with all of those things, and draw in what might be coming from hundreds of years into the future, and also what might be coming from the experience of ancestors from long past. So kind of the topic forced me into trying to find that way to solve it, and live in that nebulous space. The other thing was, finding the conceit of the premonition, someone taking in imagery and having to make a decision based off of that, how complex the challenge was for the treaty signatories in dealing with all the things that they had to deal with. What would that feel like? And I could only imagine that it would be multifaceted and coming from so many different perspectives and angles. So trying to just grasp at that. So it sort of informed the style.
Right. That's awesome. Thank you. And Alex, I was really, I don't want to use the word captivated, because I feel like that's really like about a character in a film, and obviously with your work being a documentary, it wasn't so much a captivation, but I felt really engaged and touched, and caring for all of the people that you interviewed in your film. They shared their stories with so much heart and honesty that it was hard not to just be drawn into everything that they were telling you and feeling deeply what they shared with us in the documentary. And I'm wondering a bit about how you balance the care for the people that you're interviewing, but also those working with you and yourself on a film that's dealing with such difficult conversations, and things that bring up a lot of emotions, both that are past, but the ways that comes into the present when they're being retold.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, like this movie was really like a teamwork with my producer and writer, because it's about his community, it's his father's story and his community story. So, but I've been working in Filmmakers in Saskatchewan for a couple of years now, with my producer Floyd Fable, and so I've been around like the people, and we have other projects. Like the community is always involved with all the projects that we do together, and but this one was really like kind of like really kind of different, because it's such a difficult topic, and because it's not talked about realistically. Like people don't talk about residential schools and their personal story. There's kind of like it's like you can see in the movie, like people don't dramatize it. It's like very matter of fact, like this happened. They don't really talk about how they feel or things like that, which is also like their way of being and their style of storytelling, which is so beautiful to me. But like for the care part, I guess this movie was made like really fast. We filmed like for 3 weeks in Saskatchewan, And it was just like, you know, you go to people's houses, just even just not making the movie. I was living there for a bit, and you know how you go to people's houses to visit, you have tea. And so it was kind of done in that kind of casual way of like, just letting people speak for themselves, and we weren't trying to like get anything out of them. I think it felt to me like they wanted to talk and like they were really happy to share anything, like any little story, funny stories, sad stories. Like it was all like complex and woven in together, and every side of the story is like it's all held in the way that they tell the story. So I guess like it wasn't like it was done very naturally and in a way that made people comfortable, I think, because it was in their home and it was like non-intrusive. It was we weren't going back and back, first of all because we couldn't. We weren't going back again to tell the story again, or do it like this, or do it like tell people what to do. It was more like let people do what they want and say what they want. So I guess it was done in a gentle way, I hope and I think. And as for myself, like I don't know if I really had anything to. It was difficult to edit the movie. Like you listen to the stories again and again, and I don't know if I had really like a way to deal with it. Like I think I just had to do it, and like it's not my story, so it's not as personal. But yeah, like I guess like smudging, you smudge sometimes before you work, after you work, and just talking with my producer like about like just being inspired by the strength and the beauty of people was also like, I guess, very healing. So so yeah, that's it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. And before I ask Rachel a question, I just want to remind the audience that if you're interested in asking any questions, to please put it in the chat and we will ask them as well. So Rachel, I love that there was like a bit of humor in your work. There was personal connection. There was an ease of also telling the story through animation for the viewer to take in. But I also love that I got a sense from the film that it could be told, or it was presented in a way that anyone could take in. And specifically, I thought a lot about children. It reminded me of things that I maybe would have seen as a kid on CBC or on Sesame Street, or things like that, in a way that a really important story that I should be taking in was being told. And I'm not 100% sure that that was your intention, but I assume it was a bit that it would be accessible to children as well, since it was telling a story of you as a child. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the need for telling stories about care and empathy and activism specifically directed at kids, and about them.
Again, a lot of my influences, I'm a kid from the 70s, right?
Yeah.
So and we only had one channel like growing up in the 70s, and that was like CBC. I think we got TV Ontario later on. So I used to watch Sesame Street a lot, and I also watched My Name is Simon. It was on TV Ontario. So I grew up watching a lot of those type of shows. However, I had to use a lot of my imagination when I was growing up. So what happened was Hot Docs had this program, and the question was, how would you create a film around civic engagement? And for me, I went back to the roots of civic engagement, and how it starts, because that's how my mind kind of works. It goes back, where does this start? And usually it starts with an opportunity and a teacher, right? So for me, my biggest gift that I received was the gift of giving, and that was from my dad. So I thought back that that was something in life really that changed my life, and it's a teaching that I guess my dad had received, and he passed on to me. So for me, the teaching was so important to communicate, because I've actually communicated these two stories in a parenting program that I used to teach. So for the film, I thought it was really, really important to kind of really promote this film to a wider audience. And how could I do that, I was thinking. So I kind of thought back, and when I was a kid, as I said, only one TV channel growing up, and usually my brothers were watching sports a lot of the time. I don't know if anyone remembers those Sears catalogs. So I used to play with the Sears catalogs. I would cut out, much to the chagrin of my mother, I would cut out the people, and I would cut out the backgrounds, and I would create a scene, and I would create all these plays. And that's how, because one of the things I was trying to think about was, how am I going to flash back to these teachings of my father, right? That was one of the things that was really on my mind, was how do I communicate or do these flashbacks? And I thought about that. The I thought back to the time when I would make those catalogs and cut them up and etc. So I thought, why not do kind of like a live play, as it were, and have somebody paint all the background and create these puppets, as they're called, so I can create movement, because being a first-time director, right, during COVID, you really had to come up with some creative solutions, right, to a lot of things, because you had to do a lot of things yourself. So thankfully, I found an illustrator. He's actually from my First Nation. He's a well-renowned artist from Laxal, Don Niguans, who knew my family in the 70s. He knew my community that I grew up in, Hudson, how it looked. And he was able to, it was difficult writing down my vision, trying to communicate my vision to him, but he got it. He got it, and so he managed to put everything together into what you see. And for many of us, Anishinaabe, as we call ourselves, humor is always important. And I enjoy laughing, and I think that's a big part of our culture. And I kind of wanted to have a hint of that in this film. So I hope that I answered some of your questions.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I think maybe I'll ask a question for all of you to answer. I feel like, especially since every single film that we watched in this program is centered in a community, and whether that is your own community or not your own community, there's a responsibility to entering into a space, engaging with the people about how you tell their stories. And I'm wondering if you each wanted to talk a little bit about that responsibility and how you navigate that when you're starting / you're in the middle of the the production. And I'll go in the same order. So Alex, if you would like to start.
Yeah, so in my case, it was not my community, but it was my producer's community, which he welcomed me in, and which I'm starting to know better. But I think the responsibility is just don't mess it up. Like, just don't mess the story up. Don't mess people's voices up. Don't don't try to say what you want to say because you want it. Just let people express themselves. And in my case, in this, especially the talking about residential school, like just let people speak. And like, you're there, you think they're amazing, you love them, and so show that, like, I think the responsibility is just to do things with respect and with love, like with anything. Like, a community has its own like boundaries and ways of being, and just to honor that. I think that's bottom line what it's all about. Don't mess that up.
Thank you. And Barry?
Yeah, I mean, the project, partially, I mean, I am connected to this issue from like multiple different angles. I've got Cree background, Métis background, which is complicated in relation to the treaties, and then also, settler background as well. So like my way into it is, both I have access to it, but I also don't have a singular perspective on it. I'm trying to tell a story that honored, an Indigenous perspective, particularly a Cree signatory perspective. I really needed to sit and listen. We spoke with over 70 different individuals for these long interviews to gather as many different perspectives on how a space like this could be perceived and what we would want to say. And so it was a lot of listening to little bits of what everyone was hearing or what everyone was speaking to, and trying to find some anchor points. One thing that I really benefited from was we were working with Dr. Leroy Littlebear, who's a Blackfoot elder and philosopher. And he was really keen on this idea. We were talking about perspective, that Western cultures kind of come from a time-based perspective, that things happen at some point in time, whereas we come from a place-based viewpoint. Things are happening in this place. And that has, when we're talking about things like treaty, the idea of, like, say, a lie being spoken at this point in time, 100 years from now, we're going to be 100 years away from that lie. But if you were to speak a lie at this place, that lie will be here every time you come back to this place. And so philosophies like that help to construct it let me know that I could only speak to truths that I could hear from multiple perspectives, all relating to the same issue and all relating to the same place. And that's how I kind of anchored it.
Wow, thanks so much. And Anouk.
Yeah, well, I have to say, Barry, I was very fascinated by your story and your way of telling, and I can really relate to what you're saying right now, because in my film I try to deal with things. I think what I heard you say was from different perspectives. Like I really wanted the Indigenous perspective of what was happening, but I also knew that I needed to tell this in a way that was also relevant for people who have the way, who see time as the important way of looking at things. And for me, that was both a challenge, but also a way of maybe even structuring my film. And for those of you who don't know, Greenland just had an election period, and I was so lucky that my film, at least for some, were a wake-up call, because it dealt with, I think, just this perspective of how the local community saw things in a different view than like what outsiders like the international mining corporations see things. And I think that's, for me at least, was a very, very interesting contrast to bring up.
Great, thank you. And Rachel.
I think with mine, I definitely tried to capture the culture of the atmosphere of my community. Just in terms of the sounds, if you checked out the sounds that when you're flying in, you hear an airplane. And the community I live in, it was once one of the busiest airports in Canada. So I was giving a nod to its airplane history. You can also hear a lot of birds because we live in the middle of the boreal forest, and I wanted to capture all the natural sounds. So that was something really important to me. We're surrounded by ravens. Ravens are always a presence. So I wanted to make sure that the ravens were represented here because I just love ravens. The other thing I wanted to make sure I captured too was a lot of commonalities with people who live in small communities. For example, how many of you have had walked a street and had a barking untied dog confront you? You know, so that was something you may have noticed was a barking dog. I want to put that in there. And I don't know if anybody picked it up, but in the 70s, what people used to do is ride in like kids would ride in the back of a truck. I don't know if anyone picked that up. I wanted to put it in there as just a little humor, right? And going back in the day and taking people back into the 70s, and that was kind of something normal that you would see, you know. So trying to pick up those small things. And I think a lot of the sound work, we really had to put a lot of thought into it, just because of how many different things I really want to capture about the community. And at the end, you'll notice there's a train whistle. And why there's a train whistle is because there's a train tracks going by our community. So that's something else. So I kind of wanted to capture those things and do it a lot with the sound. And also the buildings as well back then. It still looks kind of like how it looked in the film, but I wanted to capture that small town feel, definitely. So get you, miigwech.
I really appreciate actually that each of you talked about responsibilities in different ways than a lot of people think about them. So it wasn't about having a contract or agreements with people. The agreement, you can't have a written agreement with the land or the sounds of the land or a community. Like the fact that each of these responsibilities that you talked about were so personal and I guess, personal because our communities are personal and the way that we tell our stories are so personal. So I really appreciate the way each of you just talked about that. I feel like I didn't want to be looking down and writing notes, but as soon as we're done, I'm going to be writing some notes to remember some of the things that you just all said. So one of the other questions that seems to have come up a lot from the audience throughout the talks is giving advice to young filmmakers. So there's a lot of young filmmakers watching, and I'm wondering if each of you, and not even young, emerging. So I know, Rachel, you said this is your first film. So even just from that really new perspective of creating your first film, but yeah, could each of you tell us a little bit about what you would tell emerging filmmakers to do to get started, to keep going, to feel motivated? And Alex, I'll start with you again.
I'll just wait for other people to say it because like this is my first movie and I don't know.
Okay.
Like for me, I just think I got really lucky to be offered to make a movie, and I never thought I made a movie. My parents are both filmmakers, and I that's why I thought I would never make a movie. So so yeah, I don't know, like I just got lucky, so I wouldn't really have a advice to give.
Fair enough. If you do after the other answers, feel free to jump back in. Barry?
Yeah, I mean, me too. I don't have a ton of film experience. I guess my background is mostly theater, so I've been doing that for the last 10 years. But my advice or something is partially that, you know, all the experience I've got telling stories through theater, that I've done through clown, that you learn from your family or from different individuals, you know, that's all a huge wealth of knowledge that you sometimes don't think about when you're sitting in front of, you know, the plan for the shoot or trying to figure out your script or whatever, and being like, I don't know what I'm doing here. But you do know what you're doing in so many other ways. And so I find that was always helpful, is to always try and find a connection to what I actually know what I'm talking about. Like, what am I actually confident in? And how can I bring that into this, whether it's sitting over coffee and telling a joke with the person that you're about to speak with and having that relationship and being comfortable there, you know, rather than fixating on the thing that you're not super comfortable with. And then the other thing would be that when you do have something you're not comfortable with, you know, work with people that are skilled there, and then it builds out in that collaboration.
Awesome. And Inuk?
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that again, Barry. Yeah, but one thing I feel is important for me in my own process is that I want to tell personal stories and stories that affect me on a personal level, and for me that at least has been a way to both get started. I mean, we as Indigenous peoples, I mean, we do have the privilege of having a lot of stories that the Western world or the world has never really heard before, and I think it's a huge privilege to be able to tell those stories. But I also feel sometimes that I have an obligation to tell these stories. I mean, because there is stories have been told about us as Indigenous peoples for hundreds of years, right? And we've been telling our own stories for ourselves. But I really feel that the film medium is a way to have our stories shown at film festivals, for instance, and hopefully get some kind of Western or international audience, not to get acclaim, but more to tell the world that here we are, this is us, this is how we view things, and this is our point of view. And I really feel that for young and upcoming talents or people working in film or any storytelling media, I think if you come from a background, everyone has a story to tell, and no story is too local to be interesting. I mean, because we've all dealt with the same problems, we've all dealt with the same issues, and I think, for me at least, that is a huge motivator. I mean, I come from a background in short films, short documentaries, especially, and for me, telling personal Inuit Greenlandic stories in that format is, for me, not just something that I think is challenging and fun, but for me as a person, this is, you know, almost like therapy, for at least. So yeah.
Thank you. And Rachel?
Well, for me, I think taking advantage of opportunities. There's a lot more opportunities out there now for Indigenous filmmakers. Just like the Hot Docs program, I'll tell you something funny. When I was first deciding to apply for that program, I had a whole different idea. It was a totally different idea, and it wasn't animated in any sense. So that didn't fall through. So one of the things that happened was I was saying, okay, well, I still want to apply for this program. So what should I do? And I thought it was a silly idea at first. So I talked to a friend of mine. I said, I have the silliest idea. I said, this is what I want to do. I want to use this kind of background. And I explained the whole process. She said, you know what? That's a brilliant idea. She says, apply for it. She said, it's creative. So I did apply for it. It was hard to explain, but you know what? Sometimes those ideas, they're the right ones. So if you have an idea, you think it's silly, talk to a friend, do it. A part of the challenge nowadays is sometimes, being an oppressed person. Sometimes we have low self-esteem, and we don't often want to take that first step. But you know what? When you take that first step and you try something new, it might end up, you might be on imagineNATIVE here. So that's what I would really like to encourage people. There's so many stories out there right now, and I think it's very timely. So take advantage of these wonderful opportunities. Like imagineNATIVE has a lot of different programs, and so that's what I would like to suggest. Miigwech.
Yeah, and maybe the last question I'll ask is really general. Like, is there anything that we haven't asked or that you would like us to know about your film? I mean, we haven't gotten a lot of time together, so it's hard to really dive deep into all the details, but is there one thing that we haven't talked about that you'd like the audiences to know about your film? Alex, would you like to start? I feel like I keep putting you on the spot because you were asked first.
No, it's okay. What you have to know about the film, that it's really just it's great. I don't know, just watch it, and I don't know, just I wouldn't know what to say about it. That it's about residential school. It was filmed in Saskatchewan. It was just me and my producer last winter, filming people talking to us and editing. We did it pretty fast, and we got lucky and we got accepted at imagineNATIVE. So that's it.
Barry, would you like to go next?
Yeah. I feel like the film, I mean, it really looks at a lot of contradictions, and one of the biggest ones was about me putting the prayer in Cree as sort of this larger piece over the entire thing, and I very deliberately didn't translate it directly, so there's only bits of the English that come through. So much of it is you'd only understand it if you spoke Cree. And same with the song at the end. Leo and Priscilla McGilvery are these traditional musicians, and there's so much history and strength to the music that's coming in at the end. So I really tried to, the visuals are quite dark, and they're telling a story that you can kind of piece together about a really negative view of how things happened here. But underneath it, there's this push to listening, really hearing the positive, the hopeful message that is inherent in the language and is inherent in the songs. That's what I've been picking up from going and learning more from different people, is that, things aren't what they look like. There's a lot more going on. So I'm as an artist, I'm hoping to finesse that and become a little bit more skilled at showing that and having that dichotomy come through in the work. But yeah, I'm really, when I see that piece, I think about those things, the hope and the lightness in it, more so than the dark imagery.
Thanks. And then
Yeah. Rachel, can I just start by saying I love what you just said about your film and and the motivation. I mean, thank you. Very, very beautifully said. I mean, it, but if you need to know something about my film, I mean, my film is a very personal film because it really deals with a lot of the issues that my family has been through during this 50-year process of Greenland being, I mean, ending being Greenland stopping being a colony of Denmark and being a part of the Kingdom of Denmark, which actually really began this whole colonization process. But for me, my film is also a way of making sense of a lot of the things that are happening in the world today, because I see a lot of the well, you know how we say that history repeats itself, and for me, what is happening with the huge interest that is on Greenland, I mean, international interest that is on Greenland these days is really an issue of history repeating itself. And I mean, how the Danish government during the colonial times wanted to exploit the country for, I mean, all the goods that we had in the land. Now we have Australian companies, we have American companies, we have President Trump wanting to buy the country, right? We have all these international conglomerate companies wanting to come and exploit the country. And for me, I mean, this is a huge issue because I do see a lot of parallels in how we have dealt with our colonial past and our colonial history. I mean, and all the negative stuff that has come along with it. And I just don't want history to repeat itself too much, at least. So.
Thank you so much for that. And Rachel.
I think for me, one of the things I really wanted people to take away from my film was how to ask themselves, how am I passing on my values to my children? And because I think it was a really important lesson for me as a child to understand, like with my own identity, that these were my people that I was making fun of. And I was just doing what the other kids were doing. And it was something that I was learning. So I had to learn about being a human being, as my father put it. So I think that was something I really wanted to convey, is that we have a responsibility to, and we have the power actually to change generations in our family by telling stories like this, passing on teachings. And I think sometimes we forget we have that power because of all these destructive things we've been through, such as residential school. Now we have the power to introduce positive teachings. And that's what I really wanted to get across, is for people to start thinking of those positive teachings that they can pass on and create. If it doesn't exist anymore in your family, if you've lost, some of those teachings, now's the time to create new ones. And I really believe strongly in that. So that's what I wanted, is for people to think about how they're passing on their teachings and how much impact a teaching can have. So that's what I wanted to get across.
Wow, thank you, everyone. I need to say that the programming committee was extremely grateful to be able to watch all of your films and then to program them. But on top of that, I personally am so grateful for you being here today and sharing so much more about your films. It's a real honor to have gotten to meet all of you, at least in this capacity. Hopefully, maybe next year we have the chance to meet in person at imagineNATIVE. Or in other ways. But thank you so much for everything. I'm just going to remind the audience that the work is on the imagineNATIVE Watch platform for 48 hours. I really encourage you to watch all the work, but also to vote for Audience Choice Awards, which you can vote for, I think, until the end of today, and the announcement will come early in the week. So there's an Audience Choice Award for both feature and short film, and the artists have a chance of winning a $2,500 prize. You can vote more than once. Also, if you can't choose one film, please vote for as many of the films as you loved throughout the festival. And if you need any help throughout the remainder of the day, there is the help widget on the website. So please go to that and ask questions. The team there is amazing and they can help you out. Okay, we're gonna end today. Thank you so much again. I hope to cross paths with you soon, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.